Hi everyone, welcome back. This is the second lecture of several that it goes over important information for this course. This is a lecture that I'm pretty passionate about in finding the right references for you. Please remember that you can open up a file with this PowerPoint in it in the module that you open this presentation up in to follow along if you'd like. And a lot of this information is also reviewed in Landrum that you can read as well. But I think it's important to watch this too because it will go over the high points per se. So we're going to talk about research and references here. Not a super long piece here, only 5 or 6 slides or so, but some really important things and things I think that are just good again for your general development as consumers in the world, consumers of research, consumers of the world in general. But also for this class especially, you need to have peer-reviewed references in order to write a good paper. So the most important thing is to start to understand the type of references you need to write a scientific paper. Very important. I think this is one of the most important lessons anyone can learn in college, period. Are what are good references, right? Where do we go to get actual information from, okay? What can we actually trust? That's a really big thing in our world today. It's really important. So it's important to know what good research is, and we're going to be talking about what this type of reference is here in a second. But it's one of those things, again, where once you get it, and then you can really be good at navigating and going through things and being a good consumer of information. So what we're looking for in this class, and for a lot of other classes in college, are peer-reviewed journal articles. Peer-reviewed journal articles. Those are usually research studies that are submitted to what's called a journal, and that journal is published on a regular basis with research studies in it. I'm really going to walk through that process here in a second. But peer-reviewed journal articles, you can also use an academic book and handbooks of some sort. That's a little bit harder to team out sometimes. What I mean by an academic book, I don't mean a textbook. A textbook can be trusted, of course, for the most part. But what we're looking for here they would be books kind of like by specialists in the field. So if you're doing the is ADHD real topic, there's a lot of books out there that's kind of patooey about certain things with ADHD, but then there are some out there by actual researchers in the field who write books about their research, which you could use. What I'm talking about here with all this, they're called primary resources. Primary sources. What primary sources mean is they are original work. Okay, and Landrum talks about this a lot and gives you some good examples, but it's the actual research, right? So a lot of what you read, like if you read stuff in the New York Times or the Atlantic or NPR or whatever else, is a secondary source. It's somebody who's writing about the original research. A primary source is the original research. So usually Dr. So-and-so who published an article based on his or her research on something. Why is this so important? So I have a YouTube video that is also in this module where I break this down too. I'm going to briefly break it down here as well. I recommend that you watch that other YouTube video though. It's only like 8 minutes long. I think I do a good job of breaking it down there as well too. But people really devote their lives to developing good research and then getting that research published in reputable journals, and that are the peer-reviewed articles in the peer-reviewed journals. So the example that I use and the example that I think I use in the YouTube video is let's say there's a researcher named Dr. Michael Hinton. And Dr. Hinton has this research idea. He observed that adolescents who play more video games tend to maybe be more depressed than adolescents who play less video games and maybe do other activities with people. So he has this hypothesis. He may set up a research experiment And this research experiment may take a semester, may take a whole year. There are research experiments out there that are longitudinal studies that take years and years because they're measuring something over a long period of time. But a research study isn't something that's conceived in one day, then the next day you kind of just go, oh, I did it. These professional kind of research studies or high-end research studies, they can take a long time, and they have a lot of effort and planning. For those of you who take, I think, Psych 498, I think is the number, experimental lab or experimental methods in our department, you will certainly get a taste for what it takes to design a research study on a smaller scale than a lot of full-blown academics would do. So lots of effort that even goes into the research itself. But then after doing all the research, analyzing the data, which takes a lot of time, writing it up, drawing the conclusions, blah, 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 Dr. Hinton says, okay, I'm going to publish this. He sends it off. He makes a manuscript, writes it up, sends it off to a journal, maybe the American Psychologist, which is a really prestigious psychological journal here in the United States. Sends it off there. It can take significant time for him to hear back, and more than likely they're going to say, they're either going to say, no, sorry, try again next time, or they may say, yeah, this is good, but you got to edit some things or change some things, and these can be big edits or big changes, or we need you to do this to follow up on this. They can accept it with changes. It's pretty rare to get just a straight up acceptance on the first try. So this process can go back and forth for some time. So Dr. Hinton and his team is editing, sending it back, editing it, sending it back, so on and so forth. Who is reviewing Dr. Hinton's work? Well, it's a team of experts in the field, right? So there are maybe 10 other PhD psychologists in the field from prestigious universities who are reading Dr. Hinton's work and making these edits and sending it back to him. So you have experts or peers, peer-reviewed, expert peers reviewing your work and saying yay or nay, sending it back until finally, hopefully, it's accepted and gets published in the journal. So then when we read it, we can say, wow, this is a peer-reviewed research article that was really rigorous to get published and really serious, and it can be credited. It is credible. So I go through that in a little bit more detail in the YouTube video, but I thought it's important for us to really think about again, because what does peer-reviewed actually mean? I feel like we take that for granted sometimes. And what is the process to go into it? It's a lot more strenuous than someone just reading someone else's research and writing about it, right? Which is what we don't want for this class. So what's not allowed in APA writing, and what's not allowed in your paper for this class, and what's generally not allowed in other research papers or literature reviews, are secondary sources. And these can be things like newspaper articles, so a New York Times article or Huffington Post, a magazine article like the Time Magazine or The Atlantic, websites like Psychology Today, which covers a lot of stuff, great resource, but not a primary resource. Non-academic books. So although I love Malcolm Gladwell, really cool author, read all of his books, really interesting stuff, not something that you should really be citing in research or in a professional literature review, which is what we're going for here. So what do these all have in common? They are secondary resources, and they are not peer-reviewed because, anybody, can write an article and publish it in a newspaper or a website or a magazine or whatever, and it obviously doesn't go through the rigor that a peer-reviewed article does, which is what I just talked about. So these are no-nos for your references, okay? Now, there is a YouTube video I have posted in this module where you can use these to find peer-reviewed articles. So especially in good outlets like the New York Times or Time Magazine or Psychology Today, any of these, they're going to be citing the sources, right? They're going to say that, Dr. Hinton's research in violent video games, blah, 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 blah. then you can go find Dr. Hinton. You have a clue. So you can use that to then go find the original sources. I do that all the time. It's not cheating. It's okay. And I have a video demonstrating that for you in the module. So you can use these to your advantage to find the actual research, find the good stuff. Evaluating sources, they talk about this in your Landrum book. Just wanted to go over it briefly with you. This is to evaluate any sort of source. Oops, I just pressed a button here. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. I'm gonna go quickly to where we were. Press the button. So evaluating sources. So the first thing, which is what we just talked about a lot, who is authoring the source? Do they have expertise in the field? You will run into this where people think they're experts in the field and they're, you know, writing off or spouting off about something, and they're really not. They're just trying to make some noise maybe, or they don't have expertise and they think they do. Currency and timeliness. This is important. I think one of the most common examples of this that I see in these papers that we're writing, it doesn't come up in every paper, but if you're writing about something clinical like ADHD or something like that, I see people maybe using research articles that talk about an older DSM or the diagnostic statistical manual where all the diagnoses are. So maybe someone using an article that talks about DSM-3 criteria for ADHD or DSM-3 something for ADHD. We're in the DSM-5 now, so using the DSM-3 is like, nah, kind of out there. That doesn't mean that you can't use any research article that talks about the DSM-3, because it may not be super important, because their research may not be super connected to the criteria, but you need to weigh that out, and you need to figure that out. It's okay to use older research articles. You just have to also make sure that there's not new stuff in the field that adds to it or contradicts it or something like that. A lot of the older research articles that you will probably use are things that what we call seminal articles in the field. So these are like the articles that the peer-reviewed research, or articles that broke ground, that are, you know, trendsetters. For instance, in a positive psychology topic, does positive psychology make people happier in that topic? I usually recommend that people seek out an article by Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology. I think it's an article he published with a team of people in like 2001, which like kind of reveals positive psychology. So of course, even though that's 17 years ago, 18 years ago now, it is going to be relevant to your topic. So you just got to keep that in mind. Accuracy and collaboration, all this means is that, you know, one way to weigh some research that you're reading, or even a secondary source, is how far out there is this idea? Is it so far off the beaten path that no one else is talking about it? Like, why is this happening? Why are we doing this? So I use an example from the show Mountain Men in our first lecture. So this is an example of accuracy and cooperation. One of the guys on Mountain Men figured out a way to power his truck by burning wood in the bed of the truck. So some sort of gas or something he extracted from the burning wood, and it powered his vehicle. Super cool. But while he was making it, you know, my wife and I were like, why is he doing this? Like, we don't see this on anywhere else. We've never heard of this, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's a real thing, but wouldn't more people be doing it? Not like in the city, but like in these outdoorsy shows. Wouldn't it be more of a thing? So there wasn't cooperation that this is a good idea. It seemed way too far out there. So that's just an example of, you know, are there ideas that corroborate where this person's going? How do we find peer-reviewed articles? Well, we have at Fort Hays State University, we have Forsyth Library to your rescue. When you're part of a university, one beautiful, beautiful thing is that you have access to databases and peer-reviewed articles. It can be a real loss for people when they're not at a university anymore and they don't have access to these things, because these cost money. But as a student, this is part of your tuition, where you have access to all these databases, which is fantastic. I'm not going to go through how to access these and where they are here. There's tutorials in the module. There are videos to explain them more, so on and so forth, to help you navigate through these and help you navigate them. But you can find these peer-reviewed articles, these things, in these databases. One thing I want to reiterate here, and I reiterate it everywhere, when you're part of a university, don't ever pay for a source. Okay? I have a couple of students every semester in this class that get really frustrated because they say they don't want to pay for sources and that that they shouldn't have to do this. Well, you're right, you shouldn't have to do this. So do not ever pay for sources. You don't ever have to pay for sources because you can either find them here, or if the library doesn't have access to a specific article that you are looking for some reason, we have this thing called interlibrary loan, which is explained in other areas of the module, where the library here, for virtual students as well, you can submit something that you're looking for if it's not part of the collection we have here, and they will go find it for you, because we have this whole network of universities in Kansas, Kansas State, Kansas University. We're all hooked into the same system where our university can go get resources from anybody else. You just need to put in the request. It's really easy to do. I do it all the time. So don't ever pay for a resource, because there is almost nothing that you cannot get for free through Fort Hays. I already talked about this a bit on the previous slide, but use secondary sources to find primary sources. And then do something called treeing. I've had a lot of students say, boy, this really saved me, this treeing idea. All treeing is you find resources from your resource. So let's say you have this awesome article, that Seligman article that I told you about for positive psychology, right? And maybe Seligman in that article cites, he has references in that article. He has 50 references that all relate to what he talked about. So you can go back to his references and say, boy, these look really good. I'm going to go look these up. When you're reading a primary source, they're going to be citing other people's work. And if you find a piece of information, so-and-so said this, they cite the source, and you think that's really important for your paper, go to the end of the research article, find that reference, and then go get it. It's called treeing. So it's kind of like, branches going out, where you start with something and then you kind of tree off of it. It's not cheating. It's a wonderful way to find sources. It's the fastest way to find sources, because you can really find, if you do that way, you're going to find quickly that you almost have too many sources and you're going to have to trim the tree. I talk about that in the YouTube video as well. Okay, this is the last slide, I believe, for this lecture here. How do we find peer-reviewed articles? So this is just, I talked about the logistics of it. These are some of the kind of the ooey gooey stuff with finding good references. What I really want to convey here is that it can just be a grind. It's just a grind. It takes time, it takes diligence. I give you, I think, quite a bit of time in between modules, or as much as I can, to be finding references, trying to get you think about it beforehand too. It can take time. It can be really hard to find all the references that you need just off the cuff in one night. So take your time and find good references. Also finding references is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, right? You're gonna download references, or you're going to be using treeing and think a reference is awesome, but it turns out not to be awesome. That's okay. It's kind of like a puzzle where you think you have an awesome piece, like, oh, I've been looking for this piece forever, and oh, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the picture I'm trying to make. That's okay. That is okay. You just got to keep at it. You got to keep going. So a lot of times that means going back to the drawing board. When you submit your reference assignment, you aren't wedded to those 10 references or more. There's a minimum of 10, but some people do more than 10, which is fine. You don't have to. you're not wedded to those 10. As you start to outline your paper in the outlining assignment, or as you go to write your paper, if you find an additional awesome article, use it. If you find an article doesn't fit your puzzle, the picture you're trying to make, get rid of it. It's okay. You're not locked into those 10 references, but you need to still make sure the ones that you add or the ones you replace with are peer reviewed, right? One last thing, all the topics that were pre-selected for you in this course, there's a lot of research out there on them. There are. Every topic, there's a lot of research out there on them. Some are a little bit slimmer than others, but these are not topics that are super, super, super new, or there's not much out there on them. So to be frank, there is stuff out there on them. Every once in a while, I'll get a student that just says, there's nothing out there on these topics. And the topic is like, is homosexuality biologically based? And yes, there's a bunch of stuff out there. It's been researched for like 20 years. Now that usually means that, one, the student isn't trying, when you have to just try harder, or two, and this happens a lot, the student, just doesn't understand or isn't using the databases correctly or isn't using treeing, or it's more of an error of how they're going about it, which is fine. This is a learning process. So email me if you're having trouble finding references, if you feel like you're putting effort forwards, right? So if you feel like you put effort forwards and it's just not clicking, you think there's something missing in the chain, then shoot me an email and I will work with you to kind of, troubleshoot what's going on, and maybe even, point you in a direction or two to get the juices flowing. So, all right, everyone. I hope that was helpful, and talk to you again soon.